right? So the stock market bloomed. Well, the only way that you can stop that kind of constant growth of the wealthy, which, if you look at his book and his other books, subsequent books, A Brief History of Equality, for example, and his book Capital and Ideology, because there are ways that societies like Norway, Sweden, France, can all change their laws so that ideology has its imposition on the way capital works, right? And no country really does without rules on how capital works. But if you want to change it so that more wealth is spread among other people, then you have to use your ideology, your social beliefs, to basically create that situation so that people will have more money and there will be more equality in the society. As you can see with what our most recent election just did, we went the opposite direction, moved the opposite way. So he's fascinating. If you listen to his TED Talk, it's fascinating. But keep in mind, he does speak English with a serious French accent, which can affect you for the rest of your life. So, I'm getting close to finishing up here for today. I'm pretty sure that the quiz question I had for you was, what's the difference between socialism and communism? Email me if that's wrong when you look. But Karl Marx got kicked out of Germany for his views, went to France where he published, and got kicked out of France for his views. Ended up living in England where they could care less that he was there. He spent his time working mostly in the library. By the way, he also worked for the New York Times. I think it was the New York Times, but an American newspaper. He made money publishing articles in that. Marx's birthplace. Oh, Jenny, I love, by the way, Marx wrote love poems to Jenny, and they're some of the worst poems. Maybe it's because I've only read them in English, but they're terrible. But she loved them. They had children. They basically survived because of their friend Engels, who basically supported them. They eventually made money enough to be part of the middle class. Didn't really seem to be that thrilled with giving up his wealth, what little he had, for the betterment of society. So he didn't really seem to be morally that interested. There's Marx with his daughters and Engels. One of his daughters' name was Jenny as well, I believe. So he continued to write in London. They recently remodeled the library so that the place where he used to sit is no longer there. You used to be able to visit it if you were interested in doing that. I especially feel aggrieved that of all the philosophers we talk about, my beard makes me look closer to him than anyone else. And I'm not thrilled with that at all. Actually, I don't trim it as much as he must have. In fact, it looks like both of his daughters were named Jenny. So that's pretty rude, I suppose. Yeah. Jenny, yes? I can just see that happening. That used to happen in my family. So there's the memorial for the tomb of Karl Marx in London. And that's a site where people who are fond of his memory all come and celebrate. And it's also the place where a lot of people come and I think want to like do nasty things to the memorial and so on. So it's a competitive memorial for people who both want to honor and dishonor him. So he's still relevant. I think Zizek is right that his critiques of capital are typical views that people share, even though he was the first to bring these up. But at the same time, his thought was that there's this future that has to happen, because once the capitalists have gotten to the point where they have so much of the wealth and the people have so little, they will revolt. And it'll be a violent revolution. They'll overthrow the capitalists, and then they'll share everything. In a communism where no one will have property. And the kind of property he's talking about is the kind of stocks and ownership of the means of production and so on, the factories and so on. Instead, that will be owned by the people somehow in some kind of commune type situation. And by the way, the Soviet Union and even China are not really proximate to that kind of goal. The only communities that I can think of that were truly communist were like monasteries and convents. And those really don't survive on their own either. They're always supported by outside support. So really it's not even possible. I mean, during the 60s, 70s, we had groups that formed communes. Usually, of course, they were referred to as hippies. B.F. Skinner had a group that formed based on his Walden 2. Who's B.F. Skinner? Not familiar with B.F. Skinner. Bullrich something Skinner. Frederick Skinner. Behaviors, did a lot of work with pigeons. Teaching pigeons how to push a red button and stuff. And convinced that there's no point in studying our mind because you can't really see it. That, of course, was something he professed before we had the technologies to investigate what's going on in the mind. But at the time, he thought the only thing you could see is the behavior. So we can structure the behavior with, different stimuli and so on. Operant conditioning, which was also called the Skinner box, and so on. So basically, the idea is that we end up through operant conditioning, teaching mammals how to do whatever they do. And so Walden 2 was the book. Walden 2, as opposed to Walden, the book by Thoreau, that everybody makes fun of now because you can actually go to Walden Pond and realize that it's only a couple of blocks away from the town. So he's not really out in the woods all by himself. He could always go back for lunch.
It sounds very Clockwork Orange-esque, his deal.
No violence, though. That's Orwell, and that's very violent. The threat of gangs beating people up.
Yeah, but like the conditioning chamber had like the loudspeaker.
Oh, yes. That was part of yes, you're right. And to train whatever his name was, so that he wouldn't be violent anymore. They made him listen to Beethoven with his eyes propped open and drugged him so that he was basically horrified by violence. It turned out to be immoral, so they undid it. But by then it was too late, and he just jumped out the window and died. So, Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick. Okay, well, I gotta quit. Any questions for me, though? I can always stay and answer.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so if you take the concept of a lifespan from like infant to the end of life, and then you apply that same concept to humanity as a whole, so that infant would be like caveman, and then old age would be wherever that ends up to be. Where would you put us now?
Oh, well, this is just an imaginary question, I presume. I would like to hope that we're still in our childhood, and that we've got so much more to learn. And I remember I grew up watching Star Trek. In fact, the first time I saw Star Trek the movie, I was in Berlin, so it was Star Trek der Film. And I remembered laughing when Kirk would get on the elevator and say, Brücke, which means bridge. It's just fun listening to Star Trek in German. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that are fun. Yeah, so I'm hoping, but that's no basis to walk out and feel like, oh yes, we've got a whole future ahead of us. Because, according to Ricard Soleil, we've already destroyed the ecosystem. And the lecture I heard him give on that was at least 10 years ago. And at that time he said at most we have 100 years before humans will no longer be able to live on the planet.
But what if destroying the ecosystem is the same process as the end of pregnancy where you basically have your brain eaten, but then your brain goes back superior to the ecosystem?
Because you need the new development in order to deal with this screaming infant.
And the screaming
I
infant
still love
is
the
us.
scream. Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, I love the idea that technology will be our cure-all. It will come up with smart, incredible ways of transforming our environment, so we can even live on other planets or just out in space. Why transform a planet when basically what we can do is mine those things flying around out there. Meteors or asteroids, Yes, you grab a hold of those, mine them, and continue to produce things in like a space dish. Where you can always move to a better location if the sun looks like it's going to blow up. Hello. You could. And he's dead, of course. But if you found him really interesting, there's contemporaries you could kind of add to your paper. If you find, okay, here's Ludwig Feuerbach, and this is, his arguments, but here's some contemporaries that are still kind of humanists. That would be more contemporary that way. Because Feuerbach, of course, died in. Yeah. So. Good. Too much fun? All in one place?
No, I'm sorry to admit this. I'm working on another class paper right now.
Understood.
No, I just got caught up in it.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you concentrate anymore with all the things?
By tuning out everything around you and just trying to keep sanity within yourself.
It's cool that I can do that for you, because